Hi everyone, welcome back to Ticks and Crime, and today we are going to be covering the Moors murders case. Now, a massive trigger warning, this case is horrific. It covers children being murdered, and just, if you do not want to watch that or listen to that, I completely understand. I respect that. Please take care of your mental health. This is a very, very hard case. Like all children's cases, I know I personally struggle with children cases a lot, but I do think it is important to bring awareness to them and cover them. Even though the Moors murders has been covered loads, I still think it's important to keep the case alive, so people don't forget it. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley met at work. Ian Brady was very quiet, didn't really speak to people. His childhood wasn't great. He was in foster most of his life with his family that lived in Manchester. In his teenagers, he struggled to develop relationships, and he started becoming fascinated with violence and just horrible things, and especially Nazi memorabilia and books about that. And he started to develop these views about power, control, supremacy. He became obsessed with them. Now, Myra Hindley, she had an average childhood, you know. She didn't struggle to make relationships, she had a lot of friends, she had a few jobs in her childhood, and seemed to have a fairly happy childhood. So they met at work. At first, Ian Brady did not bother with Myra. He was very much closed off. He on break he would sit in a corner and just read a book. He didn't really bother to, communicate and speak to the other co-workers on break. He just did not seem to care for it whatsoever. Myra Hindley, on the other hand, she was a social butterfly. She wanted to talk to people, and Ian caught her eye. She was obsessed with this man, quite literally. She dyed her hair bleach blonde and started wearing really heavy makeup to try to get him to notice her. That did not work. But she would notice what books he was reading, and so she would buy them books and read them on break. And over time, Ian noticed that, and they would start having conversation about the books and what he thought about them and what she thought about them. And that's really how their relationship began. Now, Ian very much manipulated her. Don't get me wrong, she's a horrific, disgusting, evil person as well. But it is obvious he manipulated her as well. He started, sprinkling in some of his views and some of his extreme opinions, and things like that, until over time she just kind of believed it or agreed with it because she wanted to impress him, She wanted him to only advise for her. And eventually Ian Brady would talk to Myra about his fantasy of the perfect murder. And instead of calling the police, getting out, just telling someone or trying to convince him how wrong that is, she seemed to be all for it. She seemed excited by this as much as he was excited by it. Pauline Reed was 16 years old. She was a very kind, beautiful girl, and like many teenagers, she loved music and fashion and hanging out with her friends. She had her whole life ahead of her. she worked really hard and people thought she was going to have a bright future. She was just an amazing person. In July 1963, Pauline was walking to go to a dance with her friends. She was going to meet them there, and Myra Hindley drove a car past her. And Pauline knew Myra. She was a family friend, so she trusted her, and Myra asked her if she could help look for one of her lost gloves on the moors that she must have left that day. And Pauline, thinking nothing of it, trusting Myra because she knew her, was of course gonna go help. So she got in the car with Myra, and Ian Brady followed on the motorbike behind them. Sadly, when they got to the moors, Ian Brady beat her to death with a shovel. And for 20 years, Pauline's family never found out what happened to her. It took 20 years to find her body.
No, nobody can hurt her now. I feel her that close now, you see, so that seems to put me up a lot. I feel her so close to me. But I miss her very much, I still do. She's my little girl.
John Kilbride was 12 years old. He was a very lively and energetic and, a little bit cheeky, like all 12-year-olds are, and he absolutely loved football. He was a kind of boy that was seen to be always out playing with his friends, always getting up to a little bit of trouble, if you know what I mean. He was just one of them kids that were just always having fun, always a little bit cheeky. In November 1963, John Kilbride would be walking home from school, and Ian Brady would offer him a lift home. Now you have to remember, this is the 60s, and it was very much a community, and people trusted each other, so he thought nothing of this, and was just kind of thinking, okay, great, the sooner I get home, the sooner I can go out playing with my mates. So he took the ride, and he would never make it home that night, sadly. John's disappearance obviously devastated his family. His mother, Sheila, refused to give up hope. She was convinced that he would just walk in the door. She was convinced that her son would come home. And she refused to believe anything else, which I think most parents would do. But it got to a point where it'd been a long time, and she still believed her son was out there somewhere, alive. And eventually his body was found, and it was heartbreaking for her entire family. But Sheila was just a completely different person after this. She suffered mental breakdowns, and she would always make dinner for him and leave it on the table, expecting him to just come home.
For a long time I put an extra plate out, counting the 7 children, and I bought presents the first year after his 13th birthday, but I've still got a card actually that I bought them. When he turned up that day, I wrote on the card. It wasn't a good time, that 2 years. It was a big relief when he was found.
Keith Bennett was also 12 years old, and he just had this beautiful smile. It's a smile you can't forget. And he was known as a very kind, sweet boy. He was known to be a little bit more quiet, but he was still playful, still fun-loving. He just wasn't as outgoing as some children are. He was very helpful. He loved helping his mum, and just helping with his siblings, because he had quite a few. and he was definitely the type of boy that would go out of his way to help someone. In 1964, Keith was walking over to his grandma's, and this was not a long walk, it was literally round the corner. And he made this journey loads of times, and so he just said bye to his mom and walked off to his grandma's. This is when Myra Hindley approached him. She asked him if he could help her carry something, and being such a helpful and generous child, he was obviously going to help her, and his kindness would lead to his death. Keith's story is definitely heartbreaking because all the other children on the moor were found. Sadly, Keith was never found, and until his mother died, she refused to give up looking for him. She refused to give up. She just wanted to lay her baby to rest properly instead of in the moors, which is just heartbreaking, obviously. And to this day, Keith has never been found. And even when it was caught, when the crimes had finally been discovered, she begged Ian Brady and Myra Hindley to just tell her family where their baby is. And to the grave, they would just never tell them. Because with murderers, it's like their last piece of power they have, their last kind of thing to hold against the victims' families. It's a very common thing. It's definitely a very common thing, and it's a horrific thing. But yeah, she would never find out where her baby's body was, and she never got to lay him to rest in the way she wanted him. You know, she never got to give her son a proper funeral, a proper send-off. Leslie Ann Downey was just 10 years old when she would go missing. She was described as a lovely little girl, you know, a bubbly personality, wanted to get along with everyone, and full of life. She enjoyed music, dressing up, spending time with her family, with her siblings. The night she disappeared, she was at a fairground with her siblings, and I think this is an even more horrible detail, because when you think of a fairground, you think of going to the fairground, you know, with your mates, having fun, having a laugh, going on the rides, playing the games. You know, you think of a fairground as it's going to be a good day or night where you're going to make some memories with your friends. And sadly, that didn't happen for her. Brady and Hindley approached her, and like all the other children, they earned her trust, because back then, you know, everyone wasn't as aware as stranger danger. You know, you were kind of taught to trust adults, and adults were seen as safe. What happened next with her murder was different from the others, and this is where a lot of the evidence came from for this case, because they audio recorded her death and her sexual assault. Out of respect, and also just I am not comfortable going into them details whatsoever. It is available online if you do want to go into that research, but personally I'm not going to do that. But just know it was horrific and just fucking awful. But what this did do was really show what they were like. Because before there'd never really been evidence like this for the case. But it also was a massive part of what also got Myra Hindley jail time, because obviously with a lot of crimes back then, you know, they wanted to blame it on the men, you know. They didn't believe a woman could do something like that back then. And it's hard to believe it now, definitely, because women are kind of viewed as, you know, caring, loving, and definitely it is still a thing today, where if you think of a woman, you do kind of think of caring and loving, because it is part of our biology in our bodies. But this piece of evidence showed that Myra was just as involved as Brady was, and it definitely helped a lot with getting Myra sentenced as well.
I'm on 11 tablets on her sleeping tablets, and I've been on them for 30 odd years, and I can't go to sleep without them. She's always in my mind and in my thoughts.
Edward Evans was the oldest of all the victims. He was 17 years old. He was confident and outgoing and had a bright future ahead of him, and he was known for his sense of humour. In 1965, Edward went to their house. This time things were a lot different because someone else was there. David Smith, Hindley's brother-in-law, Myra Hindley's brother-in-law, came over, and he was traumatized, obviously. He helped with the cleanup because he was terrified for his life, so he just did everything they said to him, and then he ran home and told his wife what had happened, and he went to a phone box and called the police and said, "Come pick me up, I'm at this location, this phone box," because he was just too terrified to go anywhere right now, because obviously he'd just seen two people he trusted, and that was part of his family, commit this horrific crime. And the interesting thing is that for a very long time, David Smith was hated by the public, because they thought that wankers, pat, because they thought that obviously he helps, which, don't get me wrong, he did, but that was because he was terrified for his life, obviously, and he ran straight to the police after. So yeah, for many years after, David Smith was public enemy number one. And so after David Smith had talked to the police sent the police to Myra Hindley and Ian Brady's house. The policeman was described as a person selling bread, and Myra was pretty much like, "Oh, I don't buy bread off you," and stuff. And then the police swarmed their house. Inside their house, they found personal belongings of the victims. They found photographs and recordings, because at first, when they first went there, they were just expecting to find evidence for the one victim. They did not have any suspicion about all these other children, and they were shocked when they found all of this. Long after, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley were arrested, but Myra Hindley was sent home. But then obviously when it came to the court and all the evidence was shown, Myra Hindley at first wasn't believed to really be involved in the crimes. So she got to go back home and then come back for questioning. And Ian Brady was just arrested on the spot. And as the investigation began and continued, heartbreaking evidence was found, and this is what changed society's opinion on women murderers, because at the time they weren't really a thing, you know. People just did not believe a woman could do that. There were many searches across across Saddleworth Moor, and Ian Brady actually went on a few of them to help try find the victims and where he buried the children. All the children's bodies were discovered except for one, Keith's, which we have briefly discussed. And sadly, Keith Bennett's body has still never been discovered to this day, which is heartbreaking. He is still somewhere on the moors. The trial took place in 1966 and it captured the entire of the UK. You know, everyone was talking about this case and it just really shocked everyone. It definitely was horrific. Obviously it's horrific, it's involved with children. And this is not me saying, by the way, that murder in general is not horrific. It is, it will always be. But there's something just so much more heartbreaking when it involves children. I'm so sorry if you can hear my dog. This is Frankie, everyone. He wanted to be involved in the video. And my other dog is on my bed rooting through my things, so I'm very sorry if you can hear the noise. Please forgive me. Eventually, after the trial ended, they were both sentenced to life in prison. And I feel like Myra Hindley is definitely more talked about than Ian Brady. She definitely is. And as soon as you say Myra Hindley in the UK, everyone knows who you're talking about. Everyone can picture her face very clearly. Because she was kind of the first most notorious woman, sorry, I'm dyslexic. And she definitely changed how people see crime, definitely. And another thing was, it was very much like, how could someone so ordinary looking, hide all this darkness? So that was definitely also a big part of it. Because I think when we imagine a murderer or a child murderer, in our heads we want to just imagine someone just utterly disgusting looking, like how their minds are. We just expect them to be fucking disgusting looking. Or at least I do. I do think a lot of people think that way. And yeah, she was just definitely... She's a very big talking point in the UK if you ever bring her up. People have got loads of opinions on. The Moors murders today are still a very talked about crime, especially around where I live, because I am in Greater Manchester. And I think it's one of them things, almost in the sense of Jack the Ripper, years and years later after the crimes of Jack the Ripper, people still talk about it. People are still mortified by it, but also interested in it. And I definitely think the Moors murders is always going to remain that way. It's going to be one of them things that in hundreds of years people will still talk about this case. That is my personal belief. Sorry. But I feel like when people do remember this case and talk about it, it's almost always about Myra Hindley. But we need to remember the children and the beautiful lives lost that could have had amazing futures. I definitely feel like the children are very overlooked when people talk about this case. Sadly, obviously, we shouldn't have to talk about children's death like this. And it's so horrific that this thing goes on. But we do definitely need need to remember it's not about them, it's about the children, and it's about the families that lost children. Definitely. If you did make it this far, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all of you that watch my videos or comment on my videos. It helps the algorithm so much. So please do like and comment, and please subscribe. I would love for this channel to grow. I hope you'll have a good morning, afternoon, evening, night, whatever time it is for you watching this video. And please remember to always stay safe and always be careful. And to always be kind, because kindness is free. You don't have to pay for that. And use your manners. Please use your manners. Definitely side rant. Definitely something I've noticed growing up. You need to use your manners. Please. But anyway, yes. Have a good morning, evening or night, whatever time it is for you, and please stay safe and look after yourself. I will see you in the next video.